All right, now correspondent Susan Tenani is joining us live from New York, and then we are also being joined by Lieutenant Colonel Daniel L. Davis from Washington, D.C. He's a military expert and is also the host of Daniel Davis Deep Dive on YouTube. Susan, I'd like to come to you first. Now, we know that U.S. President, he has supported Israel, and he has been in the Situation Room and discussing about how to handle the situation. What is the latest that you can bring in?
So we also not only heard from President Biden, which you played his soundbite, we also heard from President Biden's National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, saying that the naval destroyer that belonged to the United States had joined Israel in shooting down inbound missiles. He said that, quote unquote, there was meticulous joint planning in anticipation of the attack, meaning prior to the attack. Regarding U.S. troops, what we're learning is 2 U.S. naval destroyers had launched a dozen interceptors against the incoming Iranian missiles. Brigadier General Pat Ryder also made comments. That is the Pentagon press secretary. He told reporters that no American troops were hurt. And the Pentagon also said on Monday that it was sending several more thousand troops to the Middle East region to join the 40,000 American troops that are already there.
Right. And we also know that France and Israel called for a UN Security Council meeting. And what is the latest on that so far?
Yeah, so at the United Nations today, we heard from Danny Danon, the Israeli ambassador to the UN. He said that Israel's retaliation will be, quote unquote, painful. He said, I want to tell the Iranian people this is not against them, it's against their government and regime. And then we learned that tomorrow there is going to be a Security Council meeting. This one has been called by Israel. Whether or not, there'll be follow-up meetings is yet to be seen. But the chief person in charge of putting this council together was the Israeli ambassador. That's the news that we got, of course, followed by the United States and France as well. That's 10 a.m. tomorrow. The council is expected to be to talk about the Iranian attack against Israel.
All right. Now, Colonel L. Davis, so we'll come to you now. I'd like to begin by asking you, now that Iran has attacked Israel, it's not just about the axis of resistance, although they have also been attacking at this point, and it's also about the power behind the axis of resistance. And now all eyes are on response from Israel. So what kind of response are we expecting from Israel?
Many of their leaders, but from Hagari on down to Netanyahu and the foreign minister, Katz, actually, they all use this term severe. There will be a severe response. The Wall Street Journal was reporting earlier this afternoon that in the I guess the day or so before this attack, that Iran had quietly alerted some Arabs and also Israel and the United States about what was coming. And they said that it was going to be a relatively modest situation. They were not going to go after any population centers, so that it would be a response to what happened, but then it would be done. But Israel is reported to have said, I don't care how many people are wounded, whether it's a lot or little, big or small, we will overwhelmingly respond, and we will hit either their nuclear facilities and or their oil facilities, which is where they get their lifeblood financing for the regime. So those would both be potentially existential threats to the regime and hurt very badly. But simultaneous to that, you've also had the Iranian president and their minister of defense unequivocally say that, you understand, this was a small bit of what we could do. And if there is a retaliation more from Israel, then we will hit much bigger and much harder. So basically, you have both sides saying there is a severe response coming and the same in return. So this has every possibility of continuing to escalate.
Right. I'm sure you've also been analyzing Iran's attacks in terms of weapons they used in their attack that we're covering. Considering that Israel retaliates, what kind of attack can we expect from Iran in terms of weapons that you mentioned, nuclear?
Yeah, they don't have any nuclear weapons that anybody is aware of. USCIA said they haven't even started a nuclear weapons program, though they could have a breakout in a relatively short period of time. But so far, they don't. But their conventional systems are substantial, and they have a lot of high quality and very accurate, which they have demonstrated in the last number of years, that they can hit something and that it will penetrate through the Israeli Defense Forces. Most of these hypersonic missiles, a lot of the video was just astounding to actually watch it, because the speed of those missiles going down was just something that even the Iron Dome and the Arrow system were unable to stop, many of them. So a lot can get through it. If they come in with a lot more than that, or if Iran says, okay, we're going to get you with a complex multi-phased hit where you come in with like hundreds of drones, and then while the interceptors are taking that down, then all of a sudden you come in with hypersonic missiles behind it, it could be really, really devastating. So it's not an empty threat if Iran feels like it gets hit too hard.
Well, next, we also know that the Pentagon chief and Israeli defense minister are discussing on ways to go forward, and U.S. as an ally has promised ironclad support. Now, keeping in mind, as and when Israel does retaliate, what kind of support are we looking from the U.S.'s point of view?
Well, I think the fact that these thousands of more troops that you talked about had been sent to the region, according to reports, are F-15 Strike Eagles, F-16 fighters, F-22 fighters, things that you would expect that would be in the air to try to knock down, whether it's drones or missiles or anything else, any other kind of interceptors. That's what they may be trying to do. So probably that's what they have in mind, and that's probably the reason that they sent those in there. But it's a real slippery slope, because one of the Iranian IRGC leaders tweeted out earlier tonight that if the United States gets involved and attacks Iran, then they would now start to target American forces that are scattered throughout Iraq and Syria and elsewhere in the Middle East. And they said, and I can validate it's correct, that those troops are much more vulnerable than, like some of these big targets in Tel Aviv or the air defenses, because those are small outposts. I've actually been in some of those myself during my combat deployments when I was on active duty. And they're designed for like mortars or small rockets to come in. They don't have the kind of defenses that even have a chance against some of these hypersonic missiles. And we would indeed be very, very vulnerable. So we need to be very careful not to escalate this war.
Right. Now, that being said, French President Emmanuel Macron, he has condemned Iran's attacks, and he has added that France had mobilized its military resources in the West Asia to counter Tehran. Do you think this is escalating even more?
Well, it's definitely everything is moving in that direction. I mean, you have what the French just said that there. You had the United States. They're sending more troops in there. We haven't heard any additional deployments there, but you certainly can't rule something like that. I would almost guarantee you that that's being contemplated, especially if this next round does end up going sideways and it expands laterally to other countries. And that is the big risk that, look, America's got to be clear-eyed on this. There's no winning play here to expand this war. There's nothing we could gain, because unless you go on the ground and invade Iran, and that would be a mammoth task to do, you can hurt their regime, but you can't take them out of power. You can't destroy all of their capacities and especially their speedboats, their ability to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. And some of these hypersonic missiles, there are some cards they can play if they get pushed into a corner. We need to be doing everything we can to de-escalate this situation and not ramp it up.
Right. Susan, I'd like to come back to you. Now, we know that President Biden, he has supported and said that we're going to stand by Israel. But on the other hand, we've also heard that Pentagon chief, he has also discussed with Israel that they're going to be supporting them in their operation in Lebanon. Israel is continuing its attack in Beirut, as we know right now. What are the next steps that U.S.? It seems like U.S. is on both sides. They want a ceasefire, but also want to continue supporting Israel with their operation in Lebanon. I believe you're having some trouble connecting with Susan. All right, I guess we weren't able to connect. Now, I'd like to ask you the same question. We know that U.S. President, he has been saying that he's supporting Israel, but on the other hand, we know that the Pentagon chief is discussing his operations in Lebanon. Israel is not backing out from there. What do you think? Is Israel actually now capable of attending to these multi-front wars?
No, they're not. That's one of the things I've been just really trying to tell anyone who's willing to listen. When you look at this from a military perspective and you're looking at manpower, you're looking at resources, ammunition, etc., this is a huge bite by itself that Israel has bitten off to go after Hezbollah, but to try and push them back to the Litani River, which is it's like 126 kilometers wide and 25 kilometers deep in many parts here. And there are tens of thousands of Hezbollah fighters in this area that are independent, concentrations of troops, and they have their own areas, and they have booby traps set in there. They've got tunnels dug into the sides of these mountains. They can pull launchers in and out of the sides of mountains, etc. I mean, this is a very, very difficult military task, and they still have what's going on in the Gaza Strip. That war's not over either, and now then they've opened this new one and potentially another one with Iran. And unless the United States really comes into their side here, it's hard for me to understand how Israel maintains these. There is no victory in place because the task is too high unless somehow they get the other side to just completely capitulate. And based on their past experience and the decades of time before, I don't see that happening. So I think Israel is in a very precarious situation here.
Right. Now, Iran has said that they will not retaliate unless and until Israel. Do you think anywhere at all can Israel consider talking out of this whole conflict and not really going ahead with retaliation?
I mean, that's certainly what they should do. But Netanyahu, as far as I can see, has painted himself into a corner, and especially by making these brash comments, and Daniel Hagari making his statements, and Foreign Minister Katz, because they were very, very categorical about their claims here. And frankly, the evidence suggests that maybe this is what Netanyahu wanted, was to spur a response from Iran so that they could try to draw the United States in. Because if you're taking on all of these fronts that they're talking about, and you can add the Houthis into that as well, this is just a task that one army can't handle unless they have physical help, not just ammunition support, but someone else joining them. And that's, again, that's what we should avoid at all costs, because this could go sideways in all kinds of ways. It wouldn't help anyone.
Right. Susan, if you can hear me now, let's also talk about the Security Council session. Is there any chance at all that that session could help in de-escalating this conflict?
So the United Nations Security Council has already passed a resolution back in 2006 for a ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel. What happened with that was Hezbollah violated that ceasefire and then started attacking soldiers that were on the border with Lebanon, Israeli soldiers. So if there is any hope of a revival of that resolution, then, we can maybe talk about some sort of de-escalation, at least when it comes to Hezbollah and Lebanon. As far as the meeting tomorrow is concerned, everything is just so, first of all, really not clear. And second of all, the temperature is so high, it's hard to imagine that the Security Council tomorrow would even come up with some kind of resolution. It's going to be more of the same. But ultimately, we'll have to wait and see whether or not, once again, the UN Security Council either will have some teeth moving forward between Israel and Iran, or whether or not it wants to go back to that resolution that it passed back in 2006, at least lower the temperature between Hezbollah and Israel. I will say one thing, and that is, just politically speaking, because of the relationship President Biden has had with Prime Minister Netanyahu, it's very unlikely that Netanyahu would hand President Biden some kind of diplomatic victory or some kind of ceasefire agreement before President Biden leaves office.
Right. Susan, thank you so much for joining us, giving that details. And also, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, thank you for taking out time and joining us and giving your perspective.
You bet. Thank you.